Today on AI Actually, OpenAI Dev Day reactions, and what it takes to get agents in production.
For Sam Altman, it was sort of like a drop the mic moment, right? Like, all of you guys critiqued my model, but look what I did. In 6 weeks,
I think it may have been Wade Foster from Zapier who said, "Welcome to the party, where have you been?"
That's my best advice I can give is pick your use case, make it enough to bite off, but not too big, and focus on finishing that, and then building out the next step, the next step, the next step.
Welcome to episode 7 of AI Actually. Our usual host, Pete, is out today. He's sitting on A down on the Panhandle, sipping a beverage. I am taking over hosting again. Jim Johnson here. I've been out for a couple of weeks and maybe missed a couple of episodes, gallivanting around Europe, seeing some of our AnswerRocket clients and prospective clients. So that's been a great experience to talk to more of the companies, especially those in Europe. We also have some new friends here on the podcast today. Of course, you know Mike, been here many times, but we have Reilly Carrolll along. Reilly, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, happy to be here. My name is Reilly Carrolll. I'm a senior AI solutions consultant here at AnswerRocket on the AI business transformation team.
Okay, awesome. Glad you're here. And then we have another friend here as well, Nicole Kosky. Nicole, I'm going to tear up a little bit. Nicole actually leads our AI business transformation practice. Nicole, go ahead and say hello.
Hi there. Also happy to be here today. As Jim said, stole my thunder a little bit, run the AI business transformation practice here at AnswerRocket.
So part of the reason we wanted to have Reilly and Nicole here today really was, and then of course with Mike and all his experience, is because we're going to spend some time talking about practical, real life implementation of AI agents with our clients and customers, and sort of talk through some of the nitty gritty of what happens there. Before we go there, though, we can't let pass what were the announcements this week that came out of OpenAI and sort of the meaning, and maybe try to give sort of some perspective to our listeners on what that means to them. And, for this kind of thing, I always got to turn to Mike. Mike, give me your thoughts on what happened at Dev Day or Dev
Sure.
couple of days,
Yeah.
the OpenAI gang.
Look, it was definitely an inflection point in this already a busy environment. OpenAI had just put out GPT-5, which when they bumped that number from 3 to 4, from 4 to 5, the expectations were enormous, and I would say they probably missed it when they did that. So it was kind of a big question mark what was going to happen at their Dev Day, and frankly they blew the doors off. And the way that they did it is just stunning. They introduced a bunch of new capabilities, the chat kit, the agent builder, a few others along those lines, some UI widget activities, and they did it because they used GPT-5 to help them code. So it was sort of like, for Sam Altman, it was sort of like a drop the mic moment, right? Like, all of you guys critiqued my model, but look what I did. In 6 weeks, I basically brought about the fourth revolution of this age, right? If you go back to the very beginning, the GPT moment 3 years ago, that was kind of the prompt age, and then there was the function age, then we had the reasoning age, and now we are undeniably in the agentic age, especially with this release from OpenAI.
This may be a little bit of a contrarian view. For me, there's a slight meh. So, I think it may have been Wade Foster from Zapier who said, "Welcome to the party, where have you been?" So, Microsoft's been there with AI Foundry, and AWS has been there with Bedrock, and we've got N8N and AI and Zapier. I'm trying to pull it apart and understand, is this a me too with AgentKit? So great, you're here, and that's another great platform or set of scaffolding on which to deliver agents, or is it something better than the rest? And right now, for me, it's a little bit of a me too. Reactions to that?
Well, you can certainly go down the list. Oh, do you have a way of building prompts? Do you have a way of building the agent flow? Do you have a real way of mapping the AI? And you can do that for N8N and Crew and all the others that you mentioned. And certainly OpenAI is in that mix now. I think the difference is the universe is still struggling with the question of what is an agent, and that has been fulminantly answered now. That's really the big moment here. A business workflow is an agent. Period. Drop the mic. Story's over. Here's how you build one. Here's how you hook it up. Here's how you add it to your application. OpenAI will send you a bill. Right. That to me is the moment. There's not another company to go to who Crew AI is not a household name, right? Neither
Yeah.
is N8N, right? Microsoft continues to introduce a new one of these every year, and everybody kind of wonders what they are. We're still stuck in the mode of, RAG plus MCP is a solution. That's really what Sam did here. And Sam, he was even quoted. He's talked about the gift that keeps on giving. It's not large language models. It's not the work product of OpenAI. The thing that keeps on giving is deep learning. Right. So Sam Altman, in an interview this week, he reached all the way back to deep learning, the Jeff Hinton moment, when machines learned to look at the world and teach themselves, right? And that's the thing that he is pointing to is at the heart of it, and that's what they've done here. They've looked at the world and said, there are workflows in business. Can we observe what those are doing and automate them using AI? That's what an agent is. I think that's what's going to make it a household name and stop the head scratching.
So wildly supportive, and we're here to talk about agents today. It's interesting to me. I think their daily user base went up from 700 million to 800 million in OpenAI, whatever that means. What is authentically a user? But the AWSs of the world, the Microsofts of the world, they've got a different anchor point and have been there, particularly at the enterprise, where really this agent building activity is going to make a difference. This is going to be a really interesting battle, sort of coming at it from two different angles as to what agentic scaffolding or platform is going to be the winner. And I think it's probably going to be many winners. Well, maybe multiple is a better answer. So let me shut up. Reilly or Nicole, chime in on this if you feel this argument is makes sense or isn't the right perspective.
No, I think you're right, Jim. I do think it is a bit of a me too. And I think we've been out here building agents for quite some time now. And I think it's just a matter of how we're enlisting the different tools that are available to build those agents.
Love it. So basically it's 3-1. It's
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry, Mike.
Yeah. No, I mean, Nicole's exactly right. It's not like this is the first time agents have come about, right? We've been working with, the Max AI and the Microsoft co-pilots of the world. We've been, even internally using N8N. Like, this is not the first time agents are out in the open. It's more than what Anthropic says, which is agents are prompts in a loop. It's more than that, right? Let's acknowledge it. And at the same time, it's been misunderstood in the sense that if you look in the marketplace, it's not clear that, for example, I'll pluck one out of the air. It's not clear to most people that an agent should contain its own self-test. People would say, no, an agent has prompts, an agent has models, an agent has a job. It should contain its own self-test. If it doesn't, it's not software, right? It's an idea, it's an anecdote, it's a fun thing that I did on the weekend, but it's not software, right? So the notion that there are your evals built into the agent, that's the thing that I think has been introduced here, maybe not introduced because we've been doing those for a long time. To Nicole's point, but it's become part of the vocabulary that we don't have to explain anymore. It's a requirement now, and that's going to be fabulous for anybody that's trying to automate workflows.
Nicole, sorry.
I think you bring up a great point, Mike, about this being software and agents being software. And one of the things that we've been doing while we're working on bringing these agents to life for our customers, we start with very much founded in the SDLC, the software development lifecycle. And we start with the business requirements in mind. And I think that's core of what we wanted to talk about here today. I think the way we bring success to our customers for using agents is, what is the business problem you're trying to solve? What are the core questions that support that business problem? And then what data do you have to answer those questions? And we take that and put it all together to build our agents. But the focus is founded in that core business objective.
Yeah, I agree. I would say that as remarkable and revolutionary as this new LLM and agentic technology is, a lot of those core principles for bringing any sort of process to life successfully to enterprise, they still hold true, and in some ways are even more critical now than with your classical software implementations.
Well, This is a great segue into our next topic, and I think we're sort of already there, which is sort of what it takes pragmatically to bring agents to life with our clients. And I use it that way. I use that phrase, bring it to life, because that's what, to me, an agent gets work done. Whether it's work that a company is already doing, maybe, or it's work that they'd like to do but don't have the capacity to do. And in some cases, it may be work that they haven't even thought of yet, but now this presents a whole new opportunity to do more. I'm a subscriber to the belief that in the end, this isn't going to be just a cost takeout and agents replace humans. It's going to be an opportunity to do so much more than we're already doing today. It's going to evolve the labor market. But let's talk about it. I think, it's a funny thing. We walk into clients and customers and big companies around the world and talk to them about agents, and man, are they in different places mentally about what this is. And that's sort of where the conversation starts. And then the end of it is bringing something to life, bringing an agentic solution to life for a client. Give me some perspective on where companies are and sort of whether they're ready to jump in on this. Do they even understand it? Like, what's the starting point? What's the first difficulty we encounter?
Was going to challenge Mike a moment ago. You mentioned that there's something now that we no longer have to explain to people, but I was going to challenge you that there are a few things that I find I don't have to at least explain to some people someplace, because understanding is not uniform across all of our clients, and there are gaps in different realms, whether it be what the data needs to look like to support an agent and actually be successful, or what LLMs actually are capable of, as well as the sorts of things that LLMs and agents are good at and the things that they aren't good at. So it's not uniform, and that's why every implementation has its own sort of sticking points, I guess. And it's really dependent on how far along they are in that educational curve about the technology, as well as who's bought in within the organization, whether it be someone at the very top or if it's some people towards the bottom who are really craving this. It's a very different experience depending where you're working.
Yeah, I think that's right. And just to double down on that, I think one of the things we see as we're starting out these projects is first step is aligning everyone from the sponsors who may already be further along this learning curve down to the people who they've asked to deliver the project. And these folks may have some fear that an AI agent is going to come in and take away their job. So there is a lot of alignment that happens in the early stage of a project. The other thing I'll say is one of the things as we bring those team members along who may be fearful for this kind of disruption, we often talk about, we actually have a slide that we often reference that says you spend 80% of your time actually doing analysis, and that leaves you 20% of your time as a human to understand and explain and take action on those results. With an agent, we like to flip that so that now you're spending 20% of your time because the agent is helping you get to answers faster. And then you as a human, it's not replacing you. It's giving you time to be the human in the loop and to make those really next level decisions or strategic direction based on that additional information that you have that you've never been able to get to before.
Spot on. I mentor a lot of students that are coming through college, and they are all afraid right now because those jobs are gone. And for entry level programmers who just code, right? And my direction to them is to think of it in exactly the terms that Nicole was mentioning, which is that people still have the humanity in the loop, right? We have the ability to take responsibility, right? An LLM does not have that ability. We have the ability to say no to a thing that an LLM may be obliged to answer. We have the ability to spend money, to actually allocate resources. LLMs are a long way from being empowered with those capabilities. Not saying it's not going to happen, but I am saying that we are a long way from it. And I was talking to my wife about this. My analogy is the LLM is like it's like a quantum physics book, right? I tried quantum physics, and I understand the outside of the book. I see the book, it's on the shelf. Doesn't mean that I know quantum physics, right? There's an LLM that has superhuman intelligence that I can get for 6 cents a million tokens, right? Now, it's like a book on a shelf. It can't, I can't use it for anything except maybe, I don't know, hitting cockroaches or something. It needs a purpose that requires superhuman intelligence, and people get to to decide what that purpose is. It has to be open to the right page and applied in the correct way to use that intelligence, right? So the the humans are still in the world, and the cats are too, evidently. Yeah, so the humans are in the world, and not just in the loop, right? And the LLMs are not. We are deciding what they do, and using them better is what's going to make enterprises successful.
So we talked a little bit about sort of getting started, helping our clients and customers and sort of the starting point, understanding what an agent is, sort of getting some of that alignment. Let's sort of spin forward and talk about, okay, now we're in the nitty gritty a little bit, and we know what business problem we're trying to solve. Talk a little bit about those next steps. We've got some requirements, and we know what we want an agent to do. Now it gets difficult. Nicole, I know you talked about that, thinking about it from and Mike also from an SDLC standpoint. I'm trying to keep this cat from jumping on my desk. But let's explore that a little deeper. Nicole, tell me your thoughts on sort of getting the meat of an agent development effort going.
Yeah. I think one of the things we look at as we're building out these agents is we spend a lot of time with our customers gathering requirements. I mean, just like any good SDLC, we want to understand that business problem, which we already sort of talked about. But then we dive into how are those users, the personas we're targeting to use this agent, how do they solve that problem today? How do they look at that analysis workflow, for instance? Do they have a typical workflow or hierarchy that they will follow as they're analyzing it? Because we want to make sure, however we design that agent, fits well into that workflow and actually serves up the answers to their questions and allows them to drill down in a way that's familiar to them. So there's a lot of design that goes into the front end of that. And that's where I'll hand it off to Reilly for this next point, because as we design that, one of the things that we do is we learn the context that we're going to inject into the prompts that deliver that user experience in the workflow. And I know Reilly spends a lot of his time, I like to say, beating our heads into the wall with building that context out in some of these agents. But the key thing is, that is what delivers a user experience that gets adopted, that is useful to the people we're targeting.
Yeah.
All right, Reilly, she teed you up there.
All right.
Dive a little bit into that context side of the story.
Yeah, happy to. So I absolutely agree with all of that. One of the things that can make this a little challenging is when you go to a business user, they've never been asked, for most business users at least, they've never been asked to explicitly detail every sort of thought process or bit of context that they use in their job. And those small details that they take for granted are the things that can make or break a good agent. So as we're implementing, we start with the high level, here's the math we use to do this, start working on it. But then if an agent potentially doing analysis doesn't understand this one bit of logic that other business user just has always taken for granted and assumes everyone else also takes for granted, the agent certainly does not take that for granted. And so it will fail at that task. So there's definitely a bit of interpersonal, research into the human that you're working for to gather that bit of context that can make an agent ultimately successful.
Mike, reactions to that on the context side? I mean, this harks back a little bit to our discussion of it's not unlike a new employee and all the things you need to communicate to that new employee.
Yeah. So let me, I'll use this moment to step back for a second, because I think this is interesting. So this week we lost, as a species, we lost a really important person, which was Jane Goodall. I don't know if you guys saw that news. And so what Jane Goodall did that was so fascinating was understand, how these primate societies work out in the wild. Now, she didn't have a textbook that said this is how you go about finding out what primates do. She just went. She just went and stayed there and watched, right? This and so back to the Sam Altman moment, that deep learning moment, that's what the LLMs are doing. They have just been watching what we do by way of looking at the internet, right? That
almost sounds disturbing, but okay, keep going.
And so Jane Goodall learned how these primate societies work, and there's a meta layer to it. She taught us how to do that, how to go about this whole new way of learning about nature, of learning what's in this field work that she did. And that's exactly what the LLMs are doing to discover new knowledge, right? So it's just fascinating now to hear Reilly talking about, okay, when I'm going to go teach an agent to act correctly in a workflow for a workplace, I need to know what the people used to do. I need to know what the people expect, right? It turns out that really the source of the answer is the real world. Every business out there that's been running for 10, 20, 30, 100 years, what they're doing now, that is the source of truth. That is the ground truth. That is how things should work. The agents are there because of the work that Reilly is doing. The agents are there to make that process faster, smoother, better in some ways, but not to revolutionize the way that the business is done, because at the end of the day, that's the purpose of the agents, is to make it better. And they're only going to do that because you observe what's happening and introduce them in a way that makes sense to the LLM and it makes sense to the person.
In the traditional work environment, we can sort of mostly see what an employee is doing, see the output of what they're doing, sort of bring them back into line if something goes awry, or they say something that they shouldn't say in a meeting, or you see their work product, and it's sort of natural to us. The agent's a little bit of a different animal. Can we talk about that in terms of keeping it on track and do, and I know this team has faced that on a regular basis. So somebody jump in there who is interested in this one.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different perspectives on that, Jim. I think number one, we go through several different stages in a project. One is where we're doing demos and getting live feedback from customers and users. Another is actually user acceptance testing, back to the good old SDLC here. But in user acceptance testing, we have our users hands on keyboard actually interacting with their agents. And one of the amusing things is how different the questions are that we find users come up with during the requirements gathering phase versus once they put their fingers on keyboard, it's a totally different set of questions. So bringing that context in, the different phases of the project, first thinking about the requirements and interacting with a demo, and finally hands-on keyboard, we see that context requirement evolve and we react to it and update the user experience and the context accordingly. I think the second place there's a big leap in context is when the LLMs, to Mike's point, when they level up from a 4.0 to a 5.0, or even a 4.0 to a 4.1, there are differences in how the models respond to a prompt that need to be accommodated. And that's one of the reasons we have an agentic operations team to manage this on an ongoing basis. But they have to be managed based on feedback from the users, based on updates to the supporting technologies, and so forth.
Yeah, I'll double down on what I always find to be some interesting, I guess, human psychology there, that when you're in the midst of a project before, an end user or business person actually is allowed to get hands-on with the agent, it can be like sometimes pulling teeth trying to get them to come up with example questions of what they think this agent will be useful for. And that can be such a grind. And as you're developing, those things are so critical. And those are often the most useful pieces of information we can use to train and instruct these agents. But no matter how difficult it is, as soon as they get hands-on, all of a sudden the floodgates are open and there's a million variants of questions you've never even considered or heard anyone talk about before. And now all of a sudden, like you said, these agentic operations and management post-deployment are so important because there is this concept of ongoing learning, and you introduce 2 new user profiles and all of a sudden you have this whole new way of thinking that the agent has never seen before and isn't really prepared to handle. So I definitely think that's a huge, thing that happens in almost all of our projects.
So a key point to connect back to from the beginning is this whole idea of the SDLC, right? The whole reason why the agile process was invented over and above the classic waterfall, right, was because we used to get requirements and 9 months later we would get a product and nobody wanted it because it was
SAP. Sorry.
No, right, exactly. And so instead we go agile and we say, let's work for 2 weeks and then see if we like it and pivot and do something different. It's the way that we all lead our lives, right? Why wouldn't we, lead our software development that way? And it happens with agents. The utility of the agent is emergent. You're gonna work with it for a couple of weeks, see what it does, and say, oh my gosh, I could use this in another department or in another use case, or if I just gave it this additional piece of data, what could it do? This is how it builds a flywheel. This is how it becomes very powerful in the enterprise.
I think
Oh.
those are great points. I think one of the things I want to pull out and maybe double down on there is the focus of getting to quick wins. So I think a lot of times customers will come in with this grand idea to boil the ocean and trying with their first agent to put every data source that exists at the company and solve every business problem at once. And I would say the customers we have seen be the most successful are those who come in and have a logical sort of plan to add on. So you start by landing with a simple agent that solves a targeted problem, and then maybe you add on a second data source. And the combination of those two data sources ratchets up the business value of that agent. And then maybe you get to 3, and now maybe you're building out a deep research agent. You can add in functionality incrementally, but the key thing is your users are you're going to lose your users if you don't get to that quick win fast enough. And that requires focus.
Hey, I want to turn us back to this idea of agent operations or agentic operations or agent success, whatever we want to call it. I think it's an enormously important thing. Any company that is stepping into a world where they're going to put in place agents or agentic solutions or LLM powered applications or whatever you want to talk about, you're introducing something new that hasn't existed ever in your business before. Historically, when we had sort of classic application systems, deterministic software, it required IT skills and it required some level of ongoing involvement from the business owner of whatever the software is supposed to do. But it was sort of, hey, we know this can function well. We've got it in production. We've sort of got the bugs out of it, and we're all good. And we run some basic IT operations. Now we're in a brave new world, and any organization stepping into this needs to understand that, yeah, you still need some IT skills here to do agentic operations. You need probably a lot more business commitment skills. This is part of the human in the loop, but this is the supervisor, if you will, this new worker. And you need those deep AI skills. And it takes all 3 to keep it going. I think that's a critical conversation that needs to happen early with any company that's considering going here, because they don't want to be surprised that they've got this new thing that has to happen. Whether they do it, whether they hire someone else to do it, it has to happen, and it's a different kind of ops. At least that's my point of view. Any reactions to that?
Totally agree. And I think this is what Reilly was alluding to earlier when he was talking about bringing new users into the system, changing the context. And I'll hand it off to you with that thought, Reilly.
Yeah, one of the reasons I think that this can feel a little bit foreign or like inorganic to people that they have to manage an agent in this way is because we as humans doing this kind of work, when we learn a new skill or a new piece of context, we don't have to manually press save on our brains to maintain that for future work. Whereas an agent, you actually do have to take some action to say, hey, this is important. Remember this for next time, because otherwise they won't necessarily do that. And of course, there are benefits to it not being so loose that it does alter its behavior without some human intervention. But there are certainly situations where you want to have the ability to update and maintain an agent in a way that it remains useful into the future.
Yeah, we definitely have to recognize through exactly what Reilly just said, we have to recognize how early we are in the process of AI, right? AI applications, AI in the real world. We may be 50 years in from an academic perspective. We are toddlers at best in applying it to business. And the idea that until now, it wasn't evident that we needed memory to be part of what an agent had, right? That seems kind of silly in retrospect, but nobody asked about memory for the agent until recent times, and now we're starting to say, oh, maybe we should give it a web browser, maybe we should give it memory, maybe we should give it these really common things that every employee has that basically you wouldn't be able to function in your daily life without, and we're just now thinking that maybe the agent needs those inside the language model space as well. So good lessons, and we're going to continue to learn those over the coming years.
There are times I wish I walked into work each day as a complete blank slate, remembering nothing about what happened the prior day.
Right.
Or at least when I go home. What's the Apple show?
Severance, yeah, Jim. Sometimes I do wake up and with a blank slate. I think that's it's getting better and better with coffee every morning. So
Comes with the gray hair.
yeah,
Hey
right.
guys, we're getting near time here. This is awesome. Any parting shots here of wisdom in terms of especially for companies out there that are thinking of jumping into the agent deep end of the pool?
My key message would be pick a short-term win that you can focus on to get started and build from there. That's my best advice I can give is pick your use case, make it enough to bite off, but not too big, and focus on finishing that and then building out the next step, the next step, the next step. It's have a roadmap in mind, but start
Love
small
that.
and add on.
Yep. I agree. And at the risk of sounding cliche, just get started somewhere. It's very related to what Nicole just said, but trying to identify the perfect use case and you'll never get started. So just go ahead and find something that you think will have value and then get underway and you'll learn as you go. And that's why I find you have the most success.
And tying a lot of that together, it was funny. This week we updated a white paper that we did a year ago, or maybe even 6 months ago, that was basically 6 big mistakes that people make. And ironically, in a 6-month time period, 5 of those 6 have changed, right? That tells you how fast the pace is moving here. And one of the updates that I made that's kind of now in that top category is this realization that, like Reilly pointed out, that what people ask it to do when it goes live is not what they said. So they said it was going to need to do when it started. So what's the antidote to that? The antidote is when you get a demo, ask for the negative examples. Don't just follow the ones that they provide you. Ask for the failure cases. Try to hit a guardrail, right? Ask for something that's outside of the scope. If it's language model based, if it's an agent that's being demonstrated to you, it will survive asking it in French and asking it about date ranges that aren't available and asking it to do things that it doesn't know. All of those are part of an agent being able to go live, not just as in the traditional world where, if you're demonstrating that the new payroll system works, you click and it prints out 100 checks. Looks good. Let's ship it. That's not the case with agents. You got to prove that it can do all sorts of things, that invariance and emergence is part of it. And that's what's going to prove that it's going to be a useful agent.
That's awesome. I'm lucky enough to speak with literally dozens of companies in this job and what we do. And the moment, it's funny, in these conversations, we start talking about agentic AI, and sometimes their eyes will glaze over. But I think there's this sense that we got to embrace this. We need to figure it out. The moment I see the switch flip, where they sort of start to think about it as digital employee, but still sort of employee, and all that means, and all that can go well and all that can go wrong. But it is a totally different, you can see it, and then the ideas start to flow in terms of how this can be applied, and wow, the conversation takes off. So that's the piece of advice, and the thing that I try and talk with the clients about consistently is that idea, getting them to make the mental shift, because they're sort of ready to take off with it from that point. Guys, this has been awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you for Reilly jumping in. Mike, as always, a voice of reason here.
Thanks
Thanks
for
all.
having us.